Hey everybody, I'm Marlon with Chronic Pain Warriors United. Hope y'all are all doing well. It's been a beautiful Tuesday, sunny here in Birmingham, Alabama. Hope y'all have enjoyed your day wherever you are. So the last night and this morning I was reading a paper from the Cato Institute called Cops Practicing Medicine. And it's about how obviously the DEA has been intervening in our healthcare in a massively destructive way ever since 2016 and even before that to a large degree. But the paper goes to illustrate how that's not even when it started. It goes through the whole history of when government and government agencies first started to really intervene into our healthcare, how they started to vilify and spread misinformation campaigns about those Americans and patients that used or needed to use opiate medications, and how it's been going on for about 110 years now. So I wanted to go through that and then talk a little bit about it. It's a real quick history lesson, hopefully. Usually I don't use a script. I do have a bit of one today. We'll see how it goes. And I just want to stay on point and try and shorten things down. I can ramble a bit at times. So let's get into it. The first time that government really intervened into our healthcare was in 1914 with the passage of the Harrison Act. It was passed as a tax on the manufacture, sale, and prescription of opioid medications, right? What it really was a backdoor for Congress to regulate medicine. Congress did not have the authority to do so before that. They didn't have the authority to regulate medications, drugs, or alcohol, or any of that in most opinions. That power was reserved to the states, right? They were able to regulate whatever they thought was necessary to regulate. But Congress did have the power to levy taxes. And that's what they did. That's how they wormed their way in and regulated an industry that they had no right to regulate. The Treasury Department was put in charge of enforcing it. Instead of the DEA now, it was the Treasury Department then. And they were put in charge of enforcing the law, and they started coming into our examination rooms and between us and our doctors and our pharmacies, just like the DEA is doing today, causing pain medication shortages, which I talked about in our last video, and making access to effective pain management nearly impossible to receive for a lot of Americans. The Treasury Agents, after they were given this authority, immediately started deciding for doctors what was and what wasn't a legitimate prescription. I mean, who's heard this before, right? When I was reading this and going through this and learning this history, which I didn't know how bad it was. I knew that government intervention into our healthcare had been going on a long time in many different forms. But I didn't realize it went all the way back to this. Then the Supreme Court affirmed their authority to do so in a challenge to the law in 1919. And that, ladies and gentlemen, just like that, is how we lost our right to pain relief. Our doctor-patient relationships were destroyed, and the war on drugs as we know it was born. And it has been raging for 110 years now, and has caused millions of American deaths and Lord knows how many worldwide. I mean, the count must be horrific. The war on chronic pain patients and those prescribed opioids for treatments that they need it for has been going on literally ever since then. Attacks on us, misinformation campaigns about those of us prescribed opiates have been absolutely constant. They have tried and been largely successful, thanks to an apathetic media, to tie opiate use and addiction together, even though it's not true. Mostly because of what happens when you take a person off of their medications, or their medications are taken from them or a cut off from them, as has happened uncounted times through doctor abandonment, which is rampant, and non-consensual titration of our medications, which is rampant. That's what killed, or that's what put my grandmother into an early grave. I have very little doubt of that. Physical dependence, which is what develops when you take opioids for an extended period of time, comes about from many different medications, including medications like antidepressants like Wellbutrin and anti-anxiety medications like Xanax. And the latter has killed a lot of people in its own right. Yet they aren't vilified. The people taking them aren't made to look like drug seekers and criminals. It's asinine. Over 90% of patients who use traditional pain medications will never develop mental addiction. And there is a massive difference between physical dependence and mental addiction, as I've explained to many doctors recently and over the years. How they don't know, or if they do know and they're just being obtuse about it, I don't know. But it's amazing to me how many I've had to show this. And the DSM has made that clear for a long time. Those that do develop addictions almost always do so in conjunction with other drugs. I mean, they're not just taking opiates. They're also treated like criminals just for their usage and possession, and are often thrown in jail because of it. Alcoholics, for example, are not treated like this for the most part, despite alcohol causing nearly 100,000 more deaths last year than opiates did. Alcoholics also hurt other people at a much higher rate than supposed opiate addicts. And I say supposed because the government, DEA, whatever, they have basically tried to label anyone who is using pain medications long term as an addict of some sort, which is criminally wrong. Alcohol also has zero medicinal purposes, really, other than, ironically, as a painkiller for people suffering from undertreated or untreated chronic pain, which is far too common. How many posts do we see on Reddit, Facebook, and X of people talking about trying to manage their pain with alcohol? There's no cause for this. There's 180,000 alcohol-related deaths in 2023. There were 450,000 tobacco-related deaths and 82,000 opiate-related deaths, according to government statistics. They're the only ones we have. Now, many of those 82,000, though how many to know is impossible, were absolutely chronic pain suffering Americans with untreated or undertreated chronic pain trying to self-medicate on the black market. Now, there are a few people both on Reddit and X and Facebook that I've come across who are adamant in their denial of this happening. They absolutely refuse to acknowledge it's happening. The CDC has acknowledged it's happening. The DEA has acknowledged it's happening. The Cato Institute knows it's happening. Most state governments know it's happening. But for some reason, there are these individuals who want to say, no, the sun does not rise in the east and set in the west. That is how obvious and how well known this is to occur. And yet there are those who absolutely deny it. A Pain News Network survey showed 5% of chronic pain suffering Americans admitting to using the black market either for themselves or loved ones. And with 18 million of us suffering from high impact chronic pain, That'd be 900,000 Americans. Include all 50 million suffering from chronic pain in general lasting longer than a year, and that'd be 2.5 million Americans using the black market. And the true numbers for high-impact chronic pain sufferers is higher, I have no doubt. Many won't admit to doing such a thing, even in an anonymous survey. It's like back in high school, you're not going to admit having a couple of drinks with your buddies on the weekends as a sophomore. I mean, how many people did I see in high school abusing Adderall and things like that? I mean, we hand out Adderall, which is basically crystal meth, to our kids left and right. But because it's Adderall, but people aren't going to admit to such things even in surveys like this. Excuse me. Everything that the DEA has done since 2016 after the passage of CARA has made our lives so much harder and left Americans to suffer and waste away in pain that is causing our elders to pass away in pain and leaving many untreated or undertreated for pain that decide to end their own lives. All of this stuff that was done and caused all those things was supposedly done to stop and reverse the opioid-related overdose deaths from rising, right? In 2016, there were 41,000 opioid-related deaths, according to government statistics. And in 2023, there were 81,000, provisionally, according to government statistics. And that will be revised up for several reasons, but that's more than doubled. And if you go back and look at the years before that, the year before I think was 85,000. Everything they did made this worse. On top of that, in 2019, the DEA said pill diversion is dead. Less than 1% of pharmaceutical opiates made it to the black market, and yet death rates still skyrocketed as the DEA persisted in their policies, making everything much, much worse. A lot of what they did was supposedly to stop the pill diversion, and yet in 2019, it's gone. The fentanyl flood is what's killing everybody. The graph the Cato Institute used to show this, and I'm going to put it in the video here, is stunning because the fentanyl flood caused by the DEA actions has done more damage and ended more lives than pharmaceutical opiates ever did or ever would have. So we've all seen this before. Like a jaded Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun. And I agree. It's like history is sort of repeating itself in various ways. How Americans allowed all of this to happen before, I guess it's just our memories, but it's all happened before to a certain extent, and now it's happening again. And it is costing Americans their quality of life and their lives in general, and it has to stop. Our goal at Chronic Pain Warriors United is to achieve pain management patient reform that acknowledges the right of the patient to pain relief and effective pain relief and removes bureaucrats with guns, aka the DEA, from interfering with our health care. They've been doing it for 100 years to disastrous results. It's time to get them out. Far too many Americans are being left to suffer for no reason, and the cost in American blood and treasure has been immense. It's got to stop. They have invaded every part of our health care, from making it nearly impossible for many patients to even receive effective pain management. And then when they do, there they are at our pharmacies causing medication shortages, like I said in the last video. I mean, it's so bad. So we're calling on everyone who is experiencing these things, family members, anybody who has, experience with this happening, please join your voices with ours in the calls for reform. We must achieve change, both for ourselves and our quality of life, but also for those and our loved ones who may, God forbid, need to access the system later. So please, we have got to make enough noise to start having an effect, and reform and change has got to be achieved. If you haven't yet, please go down in the comments and share your stories with us. Your stories, like you, are special and unique. Every one of you is a special and unique individual, and your stories will show what is happening to you and to your fellow Americans. And when other people see it and how wrong it is, there will be those to join us. So your stories are very important. So if you haven't, please leave us your stories. We want to read them. Hit that like button for us and hit the subscribe button at the end of the video. Join us as we push for pain management, patient reform in 2025. We have got to achieve reform. Far too many people are being left behind. Thank you. Cheers. I'm Marlon with Chronic Pain Warriors United. We'll see y'all real soon. Be well.